What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about the top 10 most surprising sales I saw last week. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So what I do with these videos, if you're not familiar, is I go over the top 10 surprising sales that I saw last week during the Heritage Weekly comic auction. And I don't just look at the top 10 high sales like I know a lot of people cover. What I like to do is I cover 5 of the sales that were surprising on the high end and 5 that were surprising on the low end. So you can see which books maybe are trending up, which ones are trending down, where there were some deals, and where there was just some crazy sales. So with that, let's get into these sales. All right, now number 10, this is a high sale. And I don't have many high sales with this title. If you are familiar with my channel, I've been talking about this for a while. We've been seeing big drops in the prices of these books, and I actually think a lot of them are getting to a point where they're pretty good books to buy right now. But this is X-Men number 13 with a CGC 7.5 that sold for $1,140. Now, I've been seeing prices of X-Men 12, which is the first appearance of Juggernaut. This is the second appearance of Juggernaut, dropping quite a bit. And so this was definitely a surprise to me to see a record of this big sale for the second appearance. Now, I have been watching that first appearance because it is one of my favorite books. I have a number of copies of it. I've been looking to upgrade my higher end copy because I've been seeing those prices come down. But this is just an example of a strong sale with X-Men. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $750. This was 52% above that estimate, so a really big sale. The prior record was $1,020 from August of this year, and it had a low sale of $720 on November 1st, so this was a big jump. 12% above the prior record and 58% above a sale from just a few weeks ago. So this is why I talk about this a lot. If you're looking for books, looking to upgrade books, buy books, any of that, patience can really pay off. There can be a lot of variability in the prices of these books, and if you don't let auctions kind of get the better of you, you know, the bidding and all that kind of thing, and if you have just some patience when you're picking these up, you can find some pretty good prices, because that's a huge swing in price over just a few weeks. $720 to $1,140. So whoever got that $720 book probably got a great deal. But $1,140, and that's probably a little high for right now, but still very strong sale. Now, I also like to talk about alternatives for these books, and with this one, this is already the alternative for X-Men number 12. X-Men 12 is a pretty expensive book in all grades, even in the low grades. This one, I would just move down to a lower grade copy. You don't need to get a 7.5. It's an early Silver Age book. For example, if you went down to a 5.0, just $234 on November 15th, and a 3.5 sold for just $130 on November 14th. So these are books that down in those low to mid grades, you can get them for just a couple $100, and it's a great appearance for Juggernaut. And I've mentioned this before, you don't necessarily have to buy the first appearance if you're looking to invest in a character. If there's a character you're interested in, you think is going to show up in the MCU, something like that. Second appearances move really just as much as the first appearance. They just have a lower buy-in point. And so definitely consider second appearances if that first appearance is just a little too expensive. All right, now number 9. This was a low sale. This was a little surprising. I mean, all these are on here. They're on here because they're surprising. This is Tales of Suspense number 57 with a CGC 5.5 that sold for just $960. This is the first appearance of Hawkeye. It's a great cover because he's on there a bunch of times. I think he's on the cover 4 times. And with the show that just came out, which seems to be pretty well received, I've enjoyed it so far from the episodes I've seen. I was a little surprised to see this low price in this book. I had estimated the price at $1,300. This was 26% below that estimate. The high sale was very recently, was $1,500 on September 13th. So it's taken a drop of about 36% from that peak. Now, the last two sales on November 8th were 1,260, and on October 30th, 1,349. So at 960, it's very possible this person just got a great deal, or it's just that people are now starting to move on to the next thing. Now that the show's out, they're moving on to something else, whatever's coming next in the MCU, or Disney, because we've got Star Wars coming out pretty soon, that kind of thing. We've got the Spider-Man movie coming out, so people are all hyped up on that. But regardless, this is a great book, in my opinion, to own. It's relatively early Iron Man. It's a key character that has gotten much more popular over the last 10 years as they've been introduced into the MCU and with the Avengers. And so it's just a character that's more well known in the general public. And that's important for the value of these books. Now, for alternatives, just like with X-Men 12, it can still be pretty expensive even in the lower grades. But his second appearance is a much more affordable book, is only 3 issues later in issue number 60. And with that one, a 6.5 sold on November 15th for just $228, and a 4.5 sold on November 14th for $170. So you've got a book that still has him on the cover, so it's a relatively good second appearance. It's not like he's not on that cover of that book, and significantly cheaper. So for around $100 to $200, you can get a nice mid-grade copy of that second appearance. So I think that's a very good alternative to Tales of Suspense number 57. All right, now number 8, and this is a cool one. This is one that I was actually hoping I would be able to pick up, but it went really, really high, at least from what I was expecting. And this is Detective Comics number 33. And so clearly a very early Batman issue. And so this was a raw book, incomplete, missing multiple reps, and restored. So I have the picture up there. You can see it basically looks like somebody globbed a bunch of paint or something on that cover. Like, the restoration is bad. It's not good. But this one sold for $9,000. So, I mean, this is an extremely expensive book regardless. I mean, this is always going to be an expensive book. I wasn't hoping to get it for nothing, but I thought it might go kind of cheap because it was incomplete and just had this really ugly restoration. But it's the 7th appearance of Batman, also has his origin, and I had estimated the price of this book at $5,000. This was 80% above my estimate. Now, for example, why I was thinking it would go for around that was a 5.0 restored copy sold earlier this year for $12,000. That 5.0 restored looked very nice. This one does not. This one is incomplete, so it would be a 0.5 restored, and it sold for $9,000, almost as much as that 5.0 restored. So this was an extremely strong sale, and it just confirms what I've been talking about for the last few months, that the strength in these Golden Age books is just, it's really there. There's a lot of strength in Golden Age. There's a lot of demand for the big name titles like Batman. And so this one was just a huge sale. I definitely was not able to pick up this copy. Now, it is a relatively rare book. There are only 99 total copies on the census, 58 universal, 36 restored, and then a couple of the other types. Now, universal copies, those are extremely expensive. With only 58 graded copies out there, they are not easy to come by. A 3.5 sold in June for $45,600. So it is a very expensive book, but this was an extremely strong sale for an incomplete copy that also had some pretty poor restoration on it. All right, now number 7. This is a low sale, and I talked about X-Men 13. Now I've got X-Men 12, and so this was X-Men number 12 with a CGC 7.0 and a white pages copy that sold for just $1,560. Now, this is why I like to mention that page quality there, because I talk about this quite a bit, where I think a lot of people overestimate how important page quality is to the value of a book. I have bought white page copies for extremely cheap, and I have sold brittle page copies for record prices. So don't put too much emphasis on white pages for value. If it's something that you really want for your collection, that's fine, that's one thing, but the page quality really is pretty far down the list in terms of the value of the book. Now, like I mentioned about X-Men 13, X-Men 12 is one of my favorite X-Men books out there. I love the red cover, similar look to X-Men 14, first appearance of the Sentinels. Plus, it's just a classic fan favorite villain, Juggernaut, right on the front, trashing the X-Men. I had estimated the price of this book at $2,100. This was 26% below my estimate. And I definitely was bidding on this book. I wanted this book. I probably should have put in one more bid, but like I've mentioned in a prior video, I'm kind of holding back on buying right now just because I've got to make sure I've got taxes and things covered for sales and all that. So trying not to buy quite as much as we were going into the end of the year. But the record for this book was $2,400 on July 17th. So this is down 35% from that record. And it sold for $1,980 a few days after this sale. So this $1,560 sale, I think, was a great price. Someone got a great deal, especially when you account for the fact that you usually can get a little bit of a premium for the white pages. I think that was a good book. Kind of wish I would have got it because I could have upgraded my copy, but well, you know, it is what it is. Had to let it go. There are other things that are more important right now. But for alternatives, I would just go to X-Men 13. I already talked about that book. That's the one that I would aim for because at least with X-Men 12, depending on your budget, you're going to spend about $400 to $500 for just about any grade, even the low grades with this book. So if that's a little too expensive, go to X-Men 13, where I said for $100 to $200, you can get a nice kind of low to mid grade copy. All right, number 6, this is a high sale. I have talked about this book before. I've done an unboxing with one maybe a little while ago, but this is Tales from the Crypt number 46 with a CGC 8.0 that sold for a record $4,080. Now, there were no prior sales in this grade. There have been sales around it, so it would have been a record regardless, but this was a big sale compared to the other sales around this grade. Now, like I said, I've talked about this book before. This is actually the last book in the Tales from the Crypt run. And so it had a lower print run. It's a little harder to come by. It's also a little harder to come by in the high grades. Now, that's the thing I've mentioned with Tales from the Crypt and the other EC titles. There are usually some very high grade copies. They're what are called file copies, and this is actually one of those. This is a Gaines file copy of this book. It's actually relatively low grade for a file copy. A lot of times they're up in the 9s, but it is arguably one of the best, if not the best, werewolf cover from this run. It's by Jack Davis, who has just some incredible covers. I know that Johnny Craig tends to get a little more attention, but I think Jack Davis, his covers have all this extra detail that I really, really like with those books. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $2,200. This was 85% above my estimate. And so for comparison, an 8.5 sold for $2,900 in June, a 5.5 sold for $1,251 in May. So you can see at just over $4,000, this was a strong sale for an 8.0. Now again, this just goes with what I've been talking about with Golden Age books. This is Golden Age books consistently beating estimates that I have for these books. Just very strong, setting new records. And while books from the other ages, bronze, silver, copper, generally been seeing those declining in price, Golden Age have been very strong consistently, especially with the major themed books like Pre-Code Horror and superheroes. Now, for this one, there are alternatives, plenty of alternatives for a book like this. Now, if you're looking for that rarity that comes with the last issue in the run, obviously you can't replicate that with an alternative. But if you want a book that has a great werewolf cover, also from Jack Davis, take a look at issue number 35. That one, I think, it arguably is a better cover. It is a pretty great cover. You've got a large depiction of that werewolf right on the cover. And now, it's not cheap, but it is more affordable than issue 46. A 1.0 sold for $170 in June, 5.0 sold for $975 in November, and a 9.0 sold for $1,250 in August. So a big price range, depending on the grade that you want to go for. You can see that 9.0 for about $1,200, significantly less than what is being paid for issue 46 right now. All right, now number 5. This is a low sale. This is X-Men number 121 with a CGC 9.8 that sold for just $1,620. Now, this is the first full appearance of Alpha Flight. Definitely a book to be on the lookout for because there have been rumors that the MCU is in some way going to be introducing Alpha Flight or Weapon Alpha or in some way introducing these characters into the MCU, whether that's in a movie or in a TV series. I have no idea, but those rumors are out there. Now, like most X-Men books, like I've talked about, they have generally been on a downtrend, especially in the Bronze Age. I did a video very recently about Bronze Age X-Men keys and talked about which ones are really undervalued right now. This was one of the books that was on that list. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $2,300. This was 30% below that estimate. The record from July 3rd was $3,000, so it's a drop of 46% from that high. Now, the sales have kind of been all over the place with this book recently. It had a $1,200 sale on November 20th, a $2,700 sale on November 8th. So this is one of those where it looks like people are really dumping copies of this book right now. There have been 6 sales of 9.8s in November alone that are recorded on GPA. If you go through October, 9. So 9 books in the last 2 months in a 9.8. So if you're interested in this book, if it's one that you're looking to add, someone or people are definitely selling a lot of them right now. I generally notice that. It's kind of strange where you see when sometimes these books will sell in groups. Like you'll see a whole bunch of sales all at once, and that's a great time to potentially find a deal because it kind of burns through the buyers and you can potentially find a great price like this or that $1,200 sale because it's still a 9.8. It's still a very high grade copy of a relatively important first appearance from the Bronze Age, one that's potentially an MCU spec book. So I think it's one that if you're looking for this book right now is probably the time to keep your eyes open because it seems like a lot of them are selling. Now, you don't need to go for an alternative with this one. If you want their first cameo appearance, that's an X-Men number 120. You could look at that one. But if you want this book, just look in the 8 to 9 range. You're going to pay about $200 to $300 for a book in that grade range. But personally, for me, with Bronze Age books, especially books like this that aren't all that expensive right now, I would recommend going into the 9s because there's a lot of them out there. It's just better to have something that's a little bit of a differentiator, get that higher grade copy of that book. All right, now number 4. This was a high sale. This one, man, I had to actually go back and double check the sales numbers to make sure I hadn't copied something in wrong because this one was a real big shocker. This was Captain America number 100 with a CGC 9.2 that sold for a record $3,600. And this wasn't a White Pages copy, anything like that. There wasn't anything that really made it stand out, didn't have a signature that wasn't like a yellow label, you know, like signed on the inside, anything like that. Just Captain America 100, 9.2, $3,600. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,550. It beat my estimate by 132%, just crushed it, monster sale. And the prior record was $2,350 from May 31st, back when we were at those peak sales prices for these books. So it not only beat my estimate, it just crushed that record. Now, it actually had a sale of $1,401 on September 1st. So it's up 53% from the record and up 157% from the last sale just a couple months ago. So honestly, I have no idea what's been driving the demand for this book. I have been seeing in general prices for this book going up recently. And this one though was just, like I said, it was huge. It almost tied the 9.4 that sold for $3,960 on November 20th. So grade lower, almost tying that sale from just about a week ago. And that book was a White Pages copy. So this was a extremely strong sale. Now, like I mentioned, this is one of those books that I've noticed recently that across basically all grades has been coming back up in price. I know a lot of people like to be saying that everything is dropping, everything's been going down in price. That is not what I'm seeing. I am seeing a number of books start to either level off or turn back up and set some new records. So really, it's something where you need to pay attention to which books you're really interested in because it's something where you could start to see prices of these books to start to turn back up. And if you've been waiting for those prices to come down, that's where I've been saying around 30%, around that point from peaks. That's where I'm generally starting to get back into books. That's where I've been seeing them level off and turn back up. Now, for alternatives, this is another one of those. You don't really need an alternative for this book. Just go down to a lower grade. It's not cheap, but this is one where it's hard to replace what this book is. It's technically Captain America number 1 for the Silver Age, similar to Hulk 102, Iron Man number 1, Submariner number 1. That's what this book is for Captain America. And a 4.0 sold for $390 on November 7th. A 3.0 sold for $300 on November 11th. So about $100 a grade point in the low to mid grades is about what you should expect to pay for this book. All right, number 3, this is a low sale. This one, again, very surprising book to see on this list right now. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 14 with a CGC 3.5 that sold for $2,280. This is the first appearance of the Green Goblin. This book has just been on fire lately, ever since he showed up in the trailer for the next Spider-Man movie. We've got that movie coming out soon. People are fighting over tickets for this movie. So it's a surprise to see one of the big, surprise characters that's going to be in this movie have its prices go down. So I do think whoever got this probably got a pretty good deal on this book. It was 31% below my estimate. I had estimated it at $3,300. Now, I had estimated it above its prior record. The prior record was $2,950, but that was all the way back on July 25th, before we even knew that the Green Goblin was going to be in this movie. So there had been lots of other higher sales in other grades that made me think that this book was going to sell for more. For example, a 2.5 sold for $2,500 on November 9th, so this one actually sold below that 2.5 sale, and it was a 3.5, a full grade point higher. So I have no idea how they're going to be using Green Goblin long term. It's very possible this will just be a one-time deal. He only shows up in this movie, they don't use him again. But it's also very possible that they're going to be building some type of team with these characters and that he'll be used in multiple movies. And if that's the case, these are the types of books that are going to go up a lot. Now, this is still early Amazing Spider-Man, one of the most important villains for Amazing Spider-Man, if not the most important villain for Amazing Spider-Man. So it's never going to be a bad book to own, especially if you can buy it at discounts to recent highs, because they got it for 23% below that recent high, so not a bad book to pick up with that kind of discount. Now, there are a ton of great alternatives for the Green Goblin in the Silver Age. One that I haven't talked about quite as much would be Amazing Spider-Man number 40. This is the origin of the Green Goblin. It is a great Ramita cover, and for that same 3.5, that's going to cost you about $175 to $200. So more than 10 times less, still a key in its own right for Green Goblin, early Silver Age book, and he's not riding around on the vacuum cleaner that he's riding around on Amazing Spider-Man 14. So that is one that I think would also be a great book to pick up as an alternative to Amazing Spider-Man 14, since that one is so expensive. All right, now number 2, and this is one that is actually up on my wall back there. This is a high sale. This is Crime Suspense Stories number 22. So this is one that, like I said, is up on the shelf. Where is it? Right there. So this was a raw copy that was graded at a 1.0 that sold for $2,880. Now, this is the first time I've had 2 raw books on my list, but I couldn't believe this one when it sold. I was pretty shocked by the price that this book hit. Now, I do think that Heritage actually undergraded this book. I took a close look at this one, and I would have estimated it at a 1.5 to a 1.8, but even at that, this was a huge sale. This is a classic pre-code horror cover from Johnny Craig. This is one of those Johnny Craig covers, and it is one of the most in-demand pre-code horror covers. And I had estimated the price of this raw book at $1,200. This was 140% above my estimate. For comparison, a 1.8 sold for $1,800 in September, a 1.0 sold for $1,389 in June, and a 2.5 sold for $2,500 on November 15th. So having this raw copy sell for more than the graded 2.5, just a massive sale. Now, this is another one of those books, I've talked about some like Vampirella number 1, that they just seem to keep going up. It's almost like every sale, the price goes up. This is another one of those books that is also generally true here. And this is actually one that's a little more common for a Golden Age book. There are 301 universal graded copies on the census, and for a Golden Age book, that's quite a bit. Usually you're going to see something around 100 or less. So a lot of copies of this on the census, but just such an in-demand book that there really aren't enough, it seems, to fill that demand. Now, for alternatives, if you want this book for this specific reason, just that it's this gruesome pre-code horror cover, you can't really have an alternative to that. But there are other covers that have relatively similar feels to them, kind of with the coloring by the same artist. And so one example is Crime Suspense Stories number 17. This is this one where a guy is being shot in the head. It's also a Johnny Craig cover. It's an extremely violent cover, and it is expensive, but quite a bit less than this one. For example, a 3.0 sold for $575 in September, a 4.5 sold for $900 on November 2nd, and a 5.0 sold for both $780 on November 21st and $1,007 on November 17th. So that's a book that you can get for quite a bit less than Crime Suspense Stories 22. It's not quite as famous of a cover, but still has that same kind of gruesome feel to it. It's also Johnny Craig, and just quite a bit more affordable, even though it is still pretty expensive. All right, now number 1, and this was the most surprising low sale that I saw this week. This is Detective Comics number 411 with a CGC 9.0 that sold for just $528. Now, this is one I was frustrated that I didn't bid on because I got distracted when this one came up for sale. I don't remember what I was doing, but I missed this one to bid on it, and I would have at least made somebody pay more for it. I don't know if I would have won it because people always, you never know who's going to bid back, but I at least would have made somebody pay more for this one because this book was an absolute steal. This is the first appearance of Talia al Ghul. This is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, and she's one of the characters in The Dark Knight Rises, so she's definitely a relatively well-known character in the general community outside of just comic books. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $900. This was 41% below that estimate. The high was actually back in 2018, and there was a $1,200 sale, but it had been down since then. It had a sale of $990 on September 30th. This is one of these books that tends to have a fairly decent range with it, but on average for the last few years, generally selling around $800 to $900. So $528 was just a great price for this book. Now, this is another one where you don't really need an alternative for this book. You just shift down to a lower grade. You can get a lower grade copy for around $200 to $300. So if you want that first appearance of that character, I would just go for that lower grade book. You don't necessarily need to get something like a 9.0. So it's not a cheap book regardless, but still not extremely expensive for what is a relatively big first appearance within Batman for the Bronze Age. All right, so those were my top 10 surprising sales this week. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.